Let's be honest for a second. Doesn't it feel like politics is just broken? You know, the old labels, the arguments we always hear, they just don't seem to fit the incredibly strange, confusing world we're actually living in. So, if our old ways of understanding things are failing, maybe what we need isn't a new political party. Maybe what we really need is a new set of tools to see the world more clearly. Let's build that toolkit.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to figure out why the old maps are broken. Then, we'll try to understand how power really works today. After that, we'll look at the huge challenge of resistance in this new landscape, before we finally get to the most important part, a whole new way of thinking about politics itself.
All right, first things first. Before we can understand what's new, we've got to get a really clear picture of what's broken. We need to see why our old ways of looking at the political world just aren't cutting it anymore.
So this idea really points to a specific moment in time when things just cracked. You know, after these massive historical shifts like the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, a lot of traditional left-wing thinking went into a deep crisis. These huge ideas that had defined politics for like a century, suddenly they felt old, obsolete, and that left this massive vacuum. And look, this isn't just some abstract academic problem. It's a feeling I think so many of us have, right? That simple divide between left and right, which used to be a pretty reliable compass, now it just spins aimlessly. It has a really hard time explaining a world of global supply chains, decentralized online movements, and problems that don't give a damn about national borders. The old maps are failing us.
So, if the old political maps are just wrong, what does the new territory actually look like? How does power really operate in our world today? Let's try to draw a new map together.
To really get a handle on modern power, two political theorists, Michael Hart and Antonio Negri, say we need a whole new word. See, the old model, imperialism, was pretty straightforward. One country takes over another. Simple. But today, they argue, we live under what they call empire, and it's not a place, it's a network. So think less of a king sitting on a throne, and more like a global web with no single spider at its center. And this is the absolutely crucial point. Empire isn't about one country dominating everyone else. It's a logic of power that flows through everything: global corporations, media networks, even international charities. Just think about how a financial crisis in one part of the world can spark a recession across the entire globe, or how a single tech company can basically set the rules for free speech in dozens of nations. That's the logic of empire. It's everywhere and nowhere all at once.
So one of the main tools of this new kind of power is what the Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben calls the state of exception. This is what happens when the rules are suddenly suspended, usually for security or because of an emergency. The classic example is a place like Guantanamo Bay, where normal laws just don't apply. But we see little echoes of it anytime a crisis is used to justify stripping away rights in a way that just kind of becomes permanent. It's a space where power gets to operate with no limit.
Okay, so we've mapped out this new, slippery, networked kind of power. And that brings us to the next, and let's be real, incredibly difficult question: how on earth do you fight back against a system like that?
I mean, this is the core problem for activists and social movements today, isn't it? When the enemy isn't a single person or a single country, but this vast, borderless network, how do you even begin to organize a resistance that makes sense? Where do you even aim your fight? And this leads to this really fascinating paradox. We see all these powerful movements all over the world fighting for really specific things, environmental justice, labor rights, data privacy, but they rarely connect with each other. They don't link horizontally. Instead, what happens is each separate group tends to leap vertically. They aim all their anger at this abstract idea of global power, but they struggle to build a broad, unified front right here on the ground.
And here's a big reason why that unity is so incredibly hard to build. This concept of antagonism suggests that a lot of our political identities are actually built on opposition. Basically, we figure out who we are by defining who we are not. Our sense of us is often created by having a really clear them. And that, you can imagine, makes building big, positive coalitions incredibly complicated.
So we've laid out a deeply complicated world. The old maps are useless. Power is a decentralized web, and resistance is all fragmented. It sounds kind of hopeless, right? But what's the answer? Well, maybe it's not a new ideology. Maybe it's a completely new way of thinking about politics. And this is where we find our new toolkit.
It turns out the most powerful tool we can possibly develop might just be a fundamental shift in our own approach.
It's this move away from a politics of rigid, pre-decided morality and towards a politics of flexible, responsive ethics. This slide right here illustrates the difference perfectly. Morality, that's about having your answers ready to go before you even hear the question. It's a fixed rulebook of good and evil, and it gives you certainty. But ethics? Ethics is about being radically open. It's about constantly questioning your own beliefs and focusing on one thing: how to respond responsibly to the unique messiness of every single situation.
And yeah, as the theorist Joanna Zielinska says here, this ethical approach is not easy. It forces us to confront the very thing that challenges our own sense of moral righteousness. It means accepting that maybe, just maybe, we don't have all the answers, and that someone else might have something to teach us that could fundamentally change our own position.
So what does this actually mean in practice? Well, it suggests that a truly political act isn't just about shouting our convictions from the rooftops. It's the much harder work of listening, of really wrestling with complexity, and of finding the most responsible path forward in the here and now. It's not about ditching your principles, but about applying them with humility and a willingness to actually learn. It's about being responsive, not just righteous.
And that leaves us with a final, pretty challenging thought. In this tangled up, confusing world, where all the old certainties have kind of crumbled away, maybe the most radical thing any of us can do isn't to declare that we have the answer, but to commit ourselves, ethically, to asking better, more responsible questions.